We can, if you have questions or things you want to focus more on, you can easily do that. That's one of the benefits of a little smaller one, it's the size. My name is Tom Koch, work for Reach Council. I am the director of school programs for Reach Council, and basically Reach Council has been in Ellis County for 35 plus years now at this point. We've been around for providing services in a lot of different ways, some directly in the schools, some with community partners. The primary focus is prevention and education. So prevention, basically, the idea is to prevent the unhealthy behavior before it occurs. We do have a very small recovery program that we're looking to grow. It's only about a couple of years old. It's a peer-led recovery group for adolescents into young adulthood. But my primary focus of our efforts is prevention. So we do a lot of that with the school district because we reach the most people when we're working with the school, reach the most youth that way. Ideally, the youth are, parents and families are as well. So I was figuring why we do focus much of our attention on the youth programs with schools. But there's other ways that we do. We do a lot of community events with coalitions, community partners, just working on different activities beyond just presentations, but activities that are healthy alternatives to being tempted into using certain substances and things like that. So if you're interested in more reach-specific programs, we have our flyers, brochures right here. If you're interested in prevention and studying the research play behind, I just got a real quick paper that you can look at if you'd like to know more about that. Definitely ask more questions when we have time. I feel level at this time this evening. So thank you all very much for being here. I appreciate it. So this is what REACH does, providing community and school-based prevention programs and recovery support services in Ellis and Johnson counties. We got started about 35 years ago, like I said. Basically, there was a lot of community partners in the Vaping who were very interested in trying to understand why illicit substances were starting to get in rural communities, much more rural than it is today, as Roberto. And they started seeing that these illicit substances that weren't common for rural communities, or they didn't think were common for rural communities, were starting to pop up more and more in the schools, through the body. So they were trying to figure out how that was happening. Then in the midst of that, there was a police officer, actually was a red police officer who came and worked for Vaping for Grayfield, and he was a younger officer, and they thought maybe he could fit in a little bit more of the high school crowd, so he actually went undercover as a high school student. And at the time of his investigation, some of the students that were involved in the trafficking of the substances found out and murdered him. Again, this is very rural, Midlothian in Texas in the 80s. It's kind of a big deal at that time. It's a big deal anytime, but it's definitely a very big deal. It got national world attention that these high school students murdered an undercover police officer. So that really kind of galvanized a lot more community involvement. It's unfortunate that a tragedy happened. Unfortunately, sometimes it takes tragedies to get a lot more buy-in. But that's the big kind of early starting point for kind of a lot of services that we provide. It really got the opportunity for us to be more involved in the school at that point as well. So that's our mission: to encourage and support safe and healthy choices by the well-being of youth, families, and communities. All right, so regardless of the substance that we talk about, we're going to focus on a few different ones tonight. A lot of why we focus and why we have concern has to do with brain, the effects that substance has on the brain during development. And as you can see here, we have, what a brain looks like, what it does, the very basic overview of different parts of the brain, what they can do. Different substances have different effects on different parts of the brain. They pretty much all have effects on the reward pathway. You got sort of dopamine, serotonin, things like that. There's some of those natural biochemicals the body makes releases. When you do something good, your body makes you feel good, and that's doing that thing. You get a good score on a test, you think you feel good for doing good on a test. That's your body rewarding. Drugs, when you take a substance that has most likely to be a substance, the illegal substances, it also creates a dopamine burst, or some of those other chemicals, feel good chemicals as well. But it produces in much higher amounts. So it triggers things in the brain in much higher amounts that the body doesn't normally produce, which it's high. Addiction is kind of one of those big things as well that you want to make sure there's understanding of the realization that most substances, and not all substances, have some type of form of addiction, whether it's physical addiction or a psychological addiction. If I can get a video to work, we're able to get this video quick. It's just kind of a real simple overview of the brain, and especially to focus on adolescents, the majority of the students that we work with are kind of in that middle school, high school range. It touches on what's going on with the brain and why introducing unhealthy things can have a very different effect than, say, on adult in their 20s, 30s, 40s. Sometimes it works.
That's okay.
I always like to kind of have a framework with the brain, what's going on with the brain, because it is such a key component of why illicit substances have the effects to that, why there are so many concerns with illicit substances, why addiction is such a big deal, why behavior changes are such a big deal. A lot of its effects in the brain, diseases of the brain, are because of the substance use, or it creates higher likelihood of different diseases developing because in kind of that dependence, that comorbidities with this, so when some things are put together. And that substance abuse has been shown to have a lot of comorbidity or co-occurrence with a lot of mental health issues.
Mind matters in minutes. The art of growing up. Let's get one thing straight. We're all human. One thing we all have in common is that we all go through the human life cycle, which goes from infancy to childhood to adolescence to adulthood to old age and to death. Compared to other species, humans are weird. We spend a long time in infancy and childhood, much longer than other mammals. Why? Because of this, our gargantuan brain. It takes about 1/4 of a century for our brains to fully develop, which is crazy and unlike any other animal. To make things even stranger, for about the first 10 years of our lives, our brain is growing, while our bodies just hang back and chill, not doing all that much, until suddenly our bodies freak out and decide to grow up all at once. And then it's our brains that need to play catch up. This weird growth phase is called adolescence. It usually lasts for about 4 or 5 years, and for many of us, it can be a pretty intense experience. Here's what's going on. On the physical side, you're building up your adult body, which includes obvious changes in size, shape, texture, and smell, but you're also changing internally as you develop the power of sexual reproduction. All the hormones driving this physical development can have a big impact on your mental state. Specifically, they can give you a craving for intense experiences, which could be anything from horror movies to romantic relationships to extreme sports. On the social front, the move to an adult body triggers a whole wave of changes in your relationships and identity. Friends become super important. You begin to look for adult role models outside of your family, and you begin to think about who you are and what you want to do with your life. Finally, while your body might have decided to grow up right now, all at once, your brain still isn't done. In fact, one of the most important areas of your brain is still under development, well beyond adolescence, even into your 20s. The prefrontal cortex is the part of your brain that helps you manage your own behaviour and plan for the future. The fact that this region is still developing explains a lot about why many adolescents live in the moment, act impulsively, and take risks. This can be a good thing when it helps you to dream big, take on crazy challenges, and go on great adventures. Not so good when those adventures fall over because of poor decisions and no planning. For some people, all these changes make adolescence awesome and fun. For others, it's scary and difficult. While for most of us, it's a mixture of both. We're all different. But the fact is that adolescence is a time of enormous change. We humans are the only species to really undergo it. So we've got to stick together and help each other out. If you're ever overwhelmed by your day-to-day experiences, don't go it alone. Talk to school staff, friends, or family, and you might be surprised how readily people want to help you. So how are you going at the moment? Do you see any of these features of adolescence affecting your life? In what way? And is there anything you want to talk to someone about?
All right, so family input is one of the biggest protective prevention factors.
Okay, this is going to sound a little nuts, but the fastest and easiest way to make
It's how you're being able to have conversations with family, with the behaviors and choices of your family, huge factor. The influence that a family has. A lot of times, you work with a lot of parents, and a lot of times parents they just feel like I'm talking to a wall sometimes when I'm trying to give them the information that is so important that they hear and listen, trying to keep safe. It's getting you through. They're still going to make the choices that they're going to decide to make, but you still have that influence. You have more of an influence than anyone else. So that's why the role of the parents is so extremely important. Having conversations about making healthy choices, understanding the consequences of the choices, understanding how those choices affect other people. Well, when we talk about substance use, the effect that those substances can have on adolescents is significantly larger than the effect that it has on adults. We're going to talk about a couple of topics that there's a lot of debate out there about what's safe to use it, where is it legal, why is it legal. The simple fact of the matter is, regardless of the substance we're talking about, marijuana, edibles, vapes, or opioids, they all affect youth differently affect adults. They all have higher instances of addiction if they use it in adolescence. They all have higher incidences of other long-term possible permanent effects because of the use if someone uses it younger in their adolescence. That's been but we focus so much on youth and adolescents. So again, what's going on with the brain is a huge reason why substance use in adolescence is such a big deal. There's a lot of different changes going on. I think I mentioned prefrontal cortex is the front part here. It's one of the last things to develop. Brain develops up until around 25, even late 20s and close to 30 for some males. It's kind of one of those things that when they say that does take men longer than grow up and fully develop. It's just one of those realities that seems to be, sometimes we see examples of that. But that development, because that brain is still going through development up until the 20s, if you introduce outside chemicals into that developing brain, the effects will be much more pronounced, long-term, possibly permanent. What affects brain changes in the brain chemistry? Your environment has an effect. The type of environment you live in, the family environment you have. The stressors that occur. What types of stress happen around you? What type of trauma potentially you've been exposed to? Those can affect the brain chemistry. And then the actual chemicals that are introduced. Like I said, if you're introducing a illicit substance, that's telling the brain to make extra dopamine. That brain's going to develop thinking. It needs that substance to develop to produce that much dopamine. Brain likes, I like this food. I like this dopamine. I'm getting this high. So I'm going to require you to keep giving me this substance to produce the dopamine. You take it away, I'm going to freak out. That's where you get withdrawals. That's where you get that movement or addiction going. So just kind of real quick going over the signs of misuse. So some of the physical signs, the bloodshot eyes, changes in appetite, weight gain changes, loss or gain, and the substance can have different appearance and some different factors, but extreme changes, noticeable changes that happen in a short period of time. Clothing smelling differently. There's things used to cover up the smell, but certainly things that are being smoked or inhaled. And then just the coordination, the way they talk can be affected as well. Again, your brain controls your speech, it controls how you communicate. So if that part of the brain's been affected by the substance, you can notice that in the conversations. Behavioral changes. So work, school, attendance may change over time. Showing up as much to those things, losing interest in those things. Needing money that we're not really understanding why they need that money. Not communicating the things that they're involved in quite as much. primarily to look out for. Like, they just don't want to tell you what they're doing, who they're hanging out with. They don't want to tell you that change friend groups that maybe you were friends there with before. Maybe all those friends come over to your house, and your house says that they would spend time. And now they don't want to come over to your house anymore. They want to go to someone else's house all the time, and they don't want to come to your house as much. So hobbies, hangouts, friends, those things. So changes. I mean, as kids grow, they're going to change no matter what. You know, some friend groups are going to change. Activities and hobbies and interests are going to change. Those are normal things. But it's sudden changes, and sudden changes that don't really have normal reasons behind them. You know, it change hobbies because when you get exposed to a new hobby, you're like, oh, I want to try this one out. You stop doing the hobby all of a sudden, even though you're doing great, you have potential for scholarships. You just stop for no reason and stop going to practice and missing games. That's a little different change. And then getting in trouble, that's the behavioral part where if they weren't the kind of student that was getting in trouble a lot, breaking the rules, going to the principal often, police don't come to the house a lot, suddenly they are, what's the reason for that change? There could be something going on. Those are all things just to kind of be aware of, keep an eye on, look out for changes. So what can you do? You can just talk to them. That's the biggest thing. You can talk. You need to be available. Speak up. Tell them you notice the change. You might get a lot of resistance at first, but again, you just got to keep going at it. Also, as a parent, it's very stressful to see these changes, especially when we're going to understand the reasons. But you got to be able to take care of yourself too. Self-care thing we talked a lot about over the last few months with mental health in general. Dealing with stressful family situations and those situations. You got to remember to take a break, take a breathe of yourself, and manage your own situation. Get help too. Talk to school counselors, talk to counselors that are out there. There's a lot of good community groups you can be a part of that will discuss ways that they've been able to bring up topics and have conversations with kiddos. We do that as well, and we try to give tips and ideas of how to have those conversations. In the beginning, we focus on prevention as kind of our focus, so we want to have those conversations in the beginning and early on. If there's suspicious of something going on, I have those follow-up conversations. Okay, I've seen this change. I'm not quite sure I understand. Can you tell me what's going on? Why are these changing? So that availability, that willingness to communicate. So again, don't neglect yourself. Don't neglect the other members of your family. It's hard sometimes to not focus on someone that you see struggle with, but take care of yourself and others as well. Avoid self-blame. That's another easy thing to do too. That doesn't help you, doesn't help your children, and to start blaming yourself for that situation. Remember, as much as you may have tried to do and communicate from this, kids can still make the choices to do it. Still are able to make their own choices. They're going to make their own choices at those points. They still have a very strong powerful influence, but at some point they still have to be able to make the choice for themselves what they are going to do. That's why they're going to do their own life. All right, let's just. Okay. So, there's different opinions on how to best go about ways to communicate that, ways to communicate your availability to find out other than doing substances. So, be aware of just that there's different schools of thought that go into how to have those conversations. Punishment versus not as much kind of a soccer and kind of things. I'm never gonna tell them to parent. I've got 4 children myself, and all 4 of them have a different way they have to work with. But you can't all 4. Craziness going on and trying to the same way to deal with it in the same way. It doesn't work. So you got to figure out what will work for you in a family situation. But just know that there are support systems out there, and we got to work. Talk. So, rules are a good thing. Boundaries, in general, boundaries is a very good thing. You manage to do that. Relationship. But having those clear boundaries, the ability to monitor those boundaries as well. Encouraging alternative healthy activities that they can get involved in and be a part of. Kids at home with not much to do that are bored, then we get in more trouble with kids that are helping out around the house and things like that. you're saying you're going to get them motivated to do those things, but giving them opportunities to do activities that are beneficial to them. And again, talking about, it doesn't just have to be about if you're concerned about that substance, but what's going on with their day, what's going on with school, what's going on with relationships. If you have it, you're really concerned about it, you're really stressed out about it, worried about it. As much as sometimes we try to shelter and protect their kids from the things that we as parents see and are dealing with, they pick up on a lot of it. They're very perceptive. So, if you know that, we're struggling with some money stuff there, we're struggling with some bill stuff there, understanding that might be scary. Again, having those open lines of communication is huge. And then, again, reaching out to outside resources, knowing that they're available. There are a lot of resources out there. Sometimes it's hard to find them, but there's lots out there. That's why I work with your school, work with, agencies that are out there to be a benefit to you and to be a benefit to them. Okay, so when we start focusing on the substances themselves, so COVID had an impact on substance use. It had a very interesting kind of statistical impact initially. There wasn't, so that the use, like new people trying something new, it kind of leveled off. Like, so adolescents, teens that were first time users, new users, it leveled off. The reason partly was because supply and demand, they're not around other people at school, if they were in lockdown situations. So new users kind of leveled off, they didn't go up for that first 2 months period, almost that first year, but then the internet side of it really kind of blew up, the social media side of it really kind of became a real big source for it. So there's definitely an increase that we saw overall in trending more during and after COVID. So 1 in 3 of high school students who had never used alcohol or other drugs report the use of the substance more often during the pandemic. So they started, the ones that were using started using it. If they had a supply source, they were utilizing it more. Okay, so just going to touch on nicotine real briefly just because we're talking about vapes. When we talk about vapes, nicotine and THC are two of the more common ones. Nicotine sometimes kind of gets forgotten about when we have that vape conversation. Nicotine is still a drug. It's still one of the most addictive substances that are out there. Nicotine use had gone significantly low through the 80s, 90s, early 2000s until vapes showed up, and then nicotine use started rising quite quickly, quite rapidly. So nicotine also has effects in the brain. Nicotine also has that dopamine boost when it's used. It can take only 3 to 5 exposures for someone to become addicted to nicotine. A lot of times people that become addicted to nicotine don't like using that gateway drug anymore as much, but it does tend to, you have that idea of starting something and then needing something stronger, potentially moving forward, and you don't want that. If someone's addicted to nicotine, it opens certain pathways in the brain that make it more susceptible to other illicit substances. So current use rates, again, you can see by that tall bar right there how much nicotine use is from vapes. And because vape use has gone so high, we're starting to see the traditional tobacco rise again. Because you don't always get the same feel from the vape as you do from tobacco cigarettes. So more of that hit tolerance is built up, so they start using regular tobacco cigarettes, even though vape cigarettes were marketed for a long time as something that you have to quit. But they didn't support that, so they were told to stop doing that, still kind of do it. Say like, oh, don't worry, it'll help you quit, but it's been shown that more and more people are starting to use tobacco cigarettes that didn't use them before they were using vapes. All right. So then the vaping levels of all these substances pretty much increase. That's kind of one of the main things that we're going to focus on when we talk about the THC. It is the level of concentration increase. Now, the thing about vapes is they're starting to be more regulated as far as how they're made and what's in them, but they're still not really regulated well. Yeah, it's supposed to be monitoring that. Haven't really caught up with that side of things. So the concentration go higher and higher. The reason that matters is the higher the concentration, the more powerful the effect that substance is going to have, the more likely it's going to lead to addicted to that substance. So vapes in general, regardless of the substance that goes along with it, It's got chemicals in it that are damaging to the lungs. A lot of times people are like, oh, it's just a water vapor that I'm breathing in, and even the secondhand vapor is just a water. It's not. There's a lot of chemicals that are mixed in with that. Again, because the regulation of the manufacturer production of the vapes, the devices themselves is not very well regulated. A lot of them are not made well and shouldn't have to be consumed and put inside your bodies the way people do. There's all kinds of different chemicals that are part of the vape chemical substance itself. It breaks down, it's turned into an aerosol. The chemical composition changes. And you're doing this aerosol essentially when you're vape. The battery that's firing it tends to wear out over time, so you start breathing some of those chemicals that are part of the battery, part of the cooling coil, start breaking down, start floating up inside the lungs. Even though there's one-time use vapes, cheaper, so it doesn't take multiple uses to break down the signals. Okay, diacetyl is one of the big ones that years ago because some of the chemicals that were found in it were actually shown to be micro popcorn factories that made it to work with the exposed to it, they don't have proper safety equipment, but it was just thrashing their lungs, tearing their lungs apart. Some of those same chemicals in a lot of different flavors that are in vapes. It's just like one of the flavoring additives. Again, a lot of flavoring additives are made to aerosol for them. Breathing for lungs. Lungs or stomach are tested for what's going to put the effects of your body. Made to go inside the lungs. Okay, so there's a lot of different types of vapes out there. One-time vapes, you got short-term ones, you got long-term ones, disposables, reusables, different. There's like you can learn a lot on social media about what's easily accessible. All vapes, doesn't matter the state, doesn't matter what's in them, are supposed to be 21. Supposed to be used. Although it's enforced, a little different sometimes, but ideally, legally, they're supposed to be 21 across the board. Again, most common thing you're going to find in vapes, and we're going to look at THC, that would be CBD, which is another chemical that's in marijuana substances, and then you also got vape. And has everyone heard of vape before? It's another, it's a different marijuana plant, a hemp plant that they're actually THC plant. Well, we'll talk more about it, but basically it's another form of marijuana. It's kind of legally reported. In a lot of places they're trying to figure out how to raise that, but it's legal in Texas. And you don't have to THC base 21, but so these are some of the more popular ones. It's like any of the brands kind of come and go. Usually the only reason that the brands kind of go is because they're in trouble for a bit. But so there's some of the more common brands that the reason they're common is because they're cheapest one, or sorry, the reason that they're some of the larger mods that are around here, those can get pretty expensive. Any questions about the vapes or the product so far? I know I'm kind of going fast. It's just there's a lot of different topics to cover. I want to make sure we get through all of them. Feel free to raise your hand. Yes. All right, so marijuana. So, marijuana had come in different forms, focusing on vapes, then usually it's in a liquid form. The concentration is not really at all. So you can say that it's a certain concentration, but what you're relying on the manufacturing, you're relying on either regular overseas or someone's garage or with kind of so legally the states are free. THC has it's got some legality in Texas. It's supposed to be for medicinal use, it's supposed to be specific ones. Because they're all just so vague. There's a lot of stuff that technically falls on the side of things that is being sold pretty easily. So you've got the more traditional types of THC of marijuana that are going to be joints, the ones the type that's burn something, you burn like some kind of cigarette, and you're smoking into your lungs, creating a combustible stuff. Then you've got the vapes, which is a liquid form of THC, some type of THC concentration, and then you've got the concentrates, which are tend to be stronger concentrations, more thicker oils or waxes that can be they're separated through 3 days. Basically using butane and burning it out. You have the chemicals in there. They're the ones that they haven't happened as much lately, but for a while before blowing houses up kind of pretty regularly, where they're trying to figure out how to do that themselves. But it can make the concentration in the 90% of THC. Like we're doing it, concentration, higher along with the high. So again, THC, cannabis, marijuana, it's kind of THC is the actual chemical that's in the cannabis. Cannabis actually has a whole family of plants. Cannabis sativa is probably the most popular one that's used and grown for most types of THC concentrates. THC, delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol, for one of 400 to 600 chemicals that are inside the plant naturally. But it's the one that has the psychoactive mind-altering effects. So basically, it attaches the part of the brain cannabinoid receptors that then stimulate that reward pathway, and it tends to have beyond the high, it tends to have effects on parts that prefrontal cortex again that have to be concentration, has to be decision making, has to be motivation. That's why those that use it over time could start to have some negative effects in those regards when you're using marijuana for long term or high concentrations, even in short periods of time. Basically, eventually it overloads what those receptors are supposed to do. So the brain's constantly sending these signals, right? Naturally, it responds to what you're doing and the environment around you and adjusts and tends to receive the signals you need to walk, talk, communicate, do the things you're trying to do. When you add a chemical like THC into there, it binds to some of those chemical receptors that are trying to send signals, so it can slow down some of those signals that are supposed to be going almost instantly. It can kind of gunk up the works. So that's why sometimes people, when they have reactions, then they slow down. The memory makes them slow down because it can kind of gunked up, kind of like a dirty filter in a way. So again, it's used in these dabs or where the higher concentrations come from. So even a small amount of these concentrations can have it can produce a pretty strong, long-lasting effect. It looks like earwax, but it's not wax, it's like dab. But basically, they can put it in that source and then heat it up and turn it into a liquid, and that's when you can vape it or smoke it or use it other ways. THC pens and nicotine pens look pretty much the same. That's the other problem when it comes to keep an eye on regulating. So a lot of schools have this zero tolerance policy for use on cannabis. You can't really tell just by looking at most of them. Most of them do have pretty strong odors, but the odor doesn't last super long, especially in the area. So it's hard to tell one way or the other what someone's using just by seeing the pen that they have without testing. So Delta 8 is this other one that has popped up over the last year or so. So again, this one comes from a different type of cannabis plant, from the hemp plant it's hemp is legal. That plant is legal in a lot of places, including Texas, because it has a much lower concentration of THC. I believe it's supposed to be like a 1% amount of THC. As long as 1% or lower, it's considered not to have that much effect, even though 1% has been to have an effect in certain settings. But the Delta 8, because it comes from what is legally a hemp plant, it's in this gray loophole area of THC regulation in places like Texas where most marijuana use cannabis use THC is illegal. So CBD is extracted in the process. So CBD is one of the other chemicals that are in all the cannabis plants. CBD doesn't have the same effect on producing a high as THC ones do. What's actually a lot of them known kind of on the medical side of things about the potential benefits that it may or may not have. But again, they're taking what isn't having negative effects and they're manipulating the substance and they're extracting different chemicals from it. And that's how they get that Delta 8 out there. Basically, it's going through a chemical process. They're extracting specific chemicals produce a Delta 8 and produce a substance that gives a legal high. So again, it's legal, pretty easy to obtain, but it does have the potential for creating a high that is similar to Delta 9 6. Even though it's legal, it still can pop up in drug testing. Some CBD can pop up positive in drug testing as well because even though CBD sometimes they market it as being no THC in it, it's almost impossible to believe that THC is how much is actually still in there. If people are using what they think is a medicinal product like CBD or something they think is legal, it still might come up as a THC positive. It could be drug testing for sports, drug testing for work, things like that. They still can help positive. Any questions about Delta 8? It's kind of a newer one that we're still trying to understand and figure out the legal status of. Technically, a Delta 10 out there now too. Also, legal limbo. It's a constantly changing, evolving world when it comes to legal and illegal. Unfortunately, it takes a lot of time to understand the full impact of those substances. The positive or the negative, it takes time to know. Unfortunately, just because it takes so much time, and there's a lot of damage that can be done in a short period of time. A lot of these substances. Not really close and for if they're readily available, it's a very, very unfortunate things that can happen. So again, CBD. Supposedly, they try to set it up. They try to make it so there's no THC because of the potential for it to psychedelic use. It's very, very difficult to make sure that it doesn't have any THC in it. So just for those of you that have considered it, just be mindful of what it's not regulated at all. It's very good oversight of information. So what's actually in it? They can say, people that are selling can say something in it. How much you guys are with supplements and before those are regulated. But I'd say supplements are not regulated very well. There's private companies that regulate. But the government is regulated. The government is regulated to use. So we're kind of taking a risk and we're getting some substances. Even though we're a certain way. But there's not a lot of solid research that backs it up. Any questions about CBD? All right, so some edible things. One of the things that has really become very popular in different forms of edibles that are out there. I'm smoking it. If you don't have like a cigarette that's really good, you don't have to worry about those chemicals, the percentage of which you bring into your lungs. You don't have to take that aerosol that you bring into your lungs here. So like, oh, this can't be bad for me. My lungs, I just need something that just happens to have a chemical that makes me high. one of the big issues that we see with edibles is that their serving sizes are very small. Serving size will take longer to have an effect. People are eating multiple serving sizes in a very short period of time. We've shown some very serious THC poisoning effects. I'm not saying that the overdose has been a lot of data that have overdose, but there have been people that have had severe psychological issues and side effects from taking these edible products. Taking too much too quickly. I mean, it can take, smoke something, it's a pretty quick reaction. So it's something we've got to wait for it to go through the digestive process before it gets moisture. So it takes a little bit longer. On here it shows the importance of that cookie within the serving size. How many people are just going to point to it? Most people not. Especially, supposed to feel high. Most people aren't doing it. I want to really feel this in the feel it. So take a lot, but it has much higher concentrations that go into your stomach than again, regulation error is that's what I'm just make the claims they want, and so 20% or whatever percent they want to claim, but there's very little way that they can, but there's nothing really assuring them. It's regulated. The poison control that has just seen so many THC related calls over the years. Because in a lot of these edible products, they look just like candies, desserts, food, snacks. So when kids get a hold of them, they can cookie, candy, gummy bears, and some chips. Actually, again, the child, the fact that having a child is very different. There's multiple that's not entirely it's very scary psychological hurts having children who are eating these products. So, as you can see here on the left, those are some edibles. Some of those look exactly non-THC products. Some of them have their little tongue-in-cheek plan where it's been. Some of them just straight up use cereal. That's one of the things I've reached out to the companies myself. It's too much time and energy to really track it all down. So we'll send a cease and desist order to them to stop doing it. They can do it, repackage it differently, however they want quickly. So it's one of those things that again, it's just not. A lot of these companies, it's not, again, it's not worth their time. It's unfortunate, but it's the reality, because what kid wouldn't think? I mean, what adult wouldn't think that's just something? It is what it says. It's kind of really read on the fine print to see what's in it. But again, it's and the way it's marketed, when we're talking about vapes or we're talking about edibles, who are candies and snacks talking about realistically? I mean, don't get me wrong, adults, we love our snacks too, right? We do. But like the small colorful packaging, like it's just way down. When they're doing things like fruit pelmels, it's super. They know if they get someone to start eating it, they're more likely to use it long term. That's why, like, even the tobacco companies, they went through, even a lot of the alcohol companies, they went through regulations on not being able to market a certain place. It was proven that one they were trying to get attention. They're not supposed to. The media source they need to change a lot over here, but vapes don't have those things. Just recently got caught up with that, but we got edibles and these things right now that aren't going to be made that same way. So they're pretty easy for kids to get a hold of if they want to. If you have any questions about it, we'll just get back to it. Okay, so one of the things, again, we're talking about the brain for a lot of the impact. So we got two brain scans. Basically, it's taking a picture of a look at the brain from the bottom up. The one on your left is full. That's activity, blood flow, oxygen. You want a good full, you want lots of activity going on in your brain. That's good. That's important. Brain needs time for you working doing it. So, on the right hand side, that's what a marijuana users brand. I believe they were started at 16 and then using multiple joints a day for 6 years, I believe. It's the 20s. It's not actually a physical toll, but it does slow down and change the ability of the brain to send those signals. When we talk about those cannabinoid receptors or receptors in the brain that maybe they're supposed to do, it's helping your body function properly and do what it's supposed to do regularly, but it's blocking some of that ability to send those signals, blocking and affecting the blood vessels in the brain, the ability to send oxygen where it's supposed to go, and in turn get the all the nutrients in it as well. So it's definitely been shown to have negative effects on the brain and brain development. The percentages. So as you can see, the red line is the THC. So over the last 20 years, it's gone up significantly. And this is why we try to make people so aware of the potential for very different reacts, the potential for addiction. That it can happen regardless of the concentration. When you go back 34 years, if it didn't have any high concentrations regularly, you can still get addicted. But not because these concentrations have gone up so much, that potential for addiction goes up as well because they're really exposed to higher concentrations in a shorter period of time, essentially. CBD side of it is just kind of give a parallel to it with the CBD safe and it's pretty much the same, but that THC concentration is too high. One of those things that always kind of makes you sad that people that are able to do this don't kind of focus on different things. There's so much kind of picking the gun properly, the different focus of everything, worrying about making concentrations to get a better high. What other things they can do if they focus their time on it. So again, 1 in 7 teenagers reporting using marijuana last month. The addiction rates in marijuana are pretty similar to the addiction rates of alcohol. I mean, when we talk about marijuana, there's the psychological addiction. There's a debate whether or not there's the full physiological addiction. The physiological is in the body, the normal chemical rhythm of the body is changed so much that it depends on the substance. And the psychological addiction is, I like the way it makes you feel, I want to get it all the time, and kind of get that feeling. There's lots of evidence of psychological addiction, but a physical addiction, things to be asked. But either way, it's an addiction. One of the big things with marijuana use as well is impaired driving. In the states where it's been approved, it's been legalized, recreational and medicinal, there's been quite an uptake from the time that it was approved medically. Most of them start medically and then go recreational. Quite a uptick from that time in impaired driving incidents, deaths resulting deaths because of the impaired driving. The HIDA, scientific trafficking areas, they do some really good studies every year. There's one of the doctor out there in Colorado area that the studies that are really about it. Really for the source if you want to do that or numbers of it. But driving influence to do not just alcohol that affects the driving abilities. THC products, energy products as well, and affecting the character's driving. Okay, so we're going to shift gears a little bit to opioids. There's just a little in the notes. There's some link for a survey. Okay, question. It's a little questionnaire or quiz that I just kind of like. They do with a lot of our history when we talk about opioids. So opioids, kind of the history of how we've gotten to it is in the 90s, the early 2000s. There were a lot of prescription opioids out there that the companies that were selling them thought, convinced, let's say, doctors that they weren't, didn't have the potential to be addictive or addictive at all in a lot of ways. So doctors were really handing these pain relieving pills out, thinking that it wasn't going to be that big of a deal. This would help relieve pain, great. studies, so a big effort to reduce and manage and control how opioids are prescribed still is. But then that kind of led into a heroin epidemic because a lot of people became addicted so easily and quickly to prescription strength opioids. They were able to find cheaper heroin products. That kind of became the next level of the opioid epidemic. And then now we're kind of shifted into fentanyl. There's different derivatives on fentanyl that will kind of cut down on. Is there, are you seeing the
I'm trying to get to it.
okay. Yeah, so now we're going to mix this fentanyl, we're going to it's a synthetic opioid, so it's not one that there's natural, it's one that's synthetically derived from different chemical substances. Okay, so we'll start with this quiz here. So what do y'all think? Drug overdoses caused roughly how many deaths in the United States in 2020? So we got 67,000, 84,000, 107,000, or 120,000. Who's got a guess? Let's go. Throw something out there. First one? Okay, so 67,000. Select the. All right, 107,000. Okay, that's provisional data. So 107,000 fatal drug overdoses. That's 15%. 107,000 people. The next one, please. Of those 107,000 deaths, how many were caused by fentanyl and other synthetic opioids? 26,000, 39,000, 50,000, or 68,000? 68. Check that one. All right. So just fentanyl and synthetic opioids. So again, the man-made opioids that are out there. Just synthetic opioids cost 68,000 deaths. What proportion of fentanyl-laced fake prescription pills contain a potentially lethal dose of fentanyl? So, just a little context for this question. A lot of the overdoses that are occurring due to fentanyl and synthetic opioids are not occurring to people that think they're taking fentanyl. A lot of them are occurring to people that are illegally buying other pills. Often they think they're using different prescription medications that, for whatever reason, they can't get a prescription from a doctor, so they purchase it through someone they know or online. But the drug distributors are adding fentanyl because they're talking about why they do it. But they're adding fentanyl to other, what they're claiming there, they're adding the fentanyl to it. And people are taking it thinking it's one thing, taking too much of it thinking it's not fentanyl, and they're overdosing. So what proportion contain a potentially lethal dose? 2 out of 10, 4 out of 10, 6 out of 10, or 8 out of 10? 4 out of 10, let's see. So 6 out of 10 that have been found. And you just gotta watch the news almost like someone finding this massive quantity of fentanyl laced products, pills, toys, or candies. Fentanyl killed some crazy number like that. 6 out of 10 of them can contain a lethal dose. Next one, please. All right. Why do drug traffickers mix fentanyl into their drugs? All right. So are they trying to kill their users? Probably not. That's their source of profit, right? They're not trying to kill off their source of profit. That's what most drug traffickers look at. They're the people that do. They're just a source of income for them. Lower the cost of manufacturing. Increase drug users' addiction. What do you think? You think increase addiction? Let's try that. Yep. So because it's more potent and it's a small amount, it's easier to get people who are using these products again, thinking they're doing something else. It's easier to get them addicted to something, even though they don't know necessarily get addicted to the fentanyl. big money, but all the time they don't because they're fake pills around. Next one, please. All right, which of these photos is Adderall? Which is the real photo? Which is the fake photo? Who says the left photo is the real one? Who says the right photo is the real one? I assume it's the right's the real one. All right, so it's a guess, right? You know, even professionals that are producing pills and in pharmacy, the doctors, it's a guess. The process to make them is pretty immediate, cheap, and it's pretty accurate as far as how they can make these pills look. So most people, without just taking it again, without testing it, there's no way you're going to know if you're getting what you think you're buying from a dealer, or you're getting something that's fake pill with other things added to it. Next one, please. All right, so if fentanyl is mixed in with another drug, which of the following senses can help you identify? Sight, smell, taste, or none? So there's a couple people that are saying taste. Most people don't know what they're supposed to taste like. Like a lot of them taste pretty bitter by themselves, but which bitter is the right bitter supposed to be tasting. There's really not any way to tell. It's going to be none of those because there's really not a way to tell. Again, because often it is mixed in with other types of substances in there. So next one, please. All right. What are the physical and mental effects of fentanyl? So heightened energy and concentration, confusion, drowsy, dizziness, nausea, vomiting, pupil size change, cold, clammy skin, possible coma, respiratory failure, or relaxation and calmness. Especially when we're talking about overdose, that tends to be what fentanyl does. Is it takes such a small amount to overdose. When people are exposed to fentanyl, it has some very serious potential side effects and consequences. Of the following quantities, what's the smallest quantity that, if converted to fentanyl, could cause a fatal overdose? So how small do you think a fatal overdose would be? 2 teaspoons, 3 grains of salt, which is 2 milligrams, 1 grape, or 1 chocolate chip? See the grape size? All right, see if the grape size. 3 grains of salt, so 2 milligrams. 2 milligrams of fentanyl can be deadly. It takes 2 milligrams for it to kill somebody. Yeah, next one, please. Okay, so what can help counter fentanyl? Cold shower, caffeine, naloxone, or none of the above? Do naloxone. Yes, naloxone is an opioid reversal. I don't know how much you guys have heard about that in the news. It was recently approved to be sold over the counter. There's a lot of places that will provide free over the counter, or even some pharmacies that get caught up with selling over the counter. Not for the prescriptions, but you can get free prescriptions for it as well. If it's something that you want to have. We have it as well, so you get contacts with us if you do. But naloxone has been an opioid reversal medicine essentially, and one of the good things about it is that the side effects are very, very minimal. You can actually get multiple doses of naloxone, have any negative effects from it. But there's all kinds of training, so hopefully if people want to have one, maybe we can do something here with me in the near future. But it's one of those, to me, it's kind of like an AED. AED and CPR, you learn how to use those. It's pretty normal for everybody to learn how to use those now. I don't think everybody's might have had a class, and if they haven't, like you should. But there's AEDs all over buildings now. I think a lot more students and you can't use it. So it should be something unfortunately needed up. But it could be a good person. If you administer naloxone to a friend who's overdosed, should you still call 911? Yes, absolutely. It can sometimes have a temporary effect, oftentimes a temporary effect. It's not just suddenly be cured of the effects of the opioid. You can get the dose, it can bring you out of it, but depending on the strength and how much you expose to the fentanyl or the other opioid, it can come back, that overdose can come back. So you definitely need to get a hold of 911 emergency services, whatever, regardless if they got naloxone. Yes, that's what they've approved. There's a nasal one, there's an injection, but for over the counter use, it's the nasal one. That's what most, it's super easy to use. Yeah. All right. We can go back to the PowerPoint. So, we're talking about opioids again because it's become such a deal. It's been a big opioids have been a big deal for a while. It's another one that keeps kind of changing, keeps evolving. Opioids, they were developed for pain relief. The opioid medicines, the prescriptions that are out there were created for a legitimate helpful purpose. A lot of the life-threatening, life-devastating effects of them didn't occur because people were trying to get addicted, they were trying to misuse or abuse it. They weren't, the way they were marketed, the way they were used, they weren't handled well. So unfortunately, goodness, in those situations, it took a while for the effects, to understand the effects of it caught up. A lot of lives are devastated, are still being devastated because of the misunderstanding of the effect of those prescriptions. And again, fentanyl. Fentanyl was created in the 60s as another type of pain reliever. But again, it's those that want to use it for less than legitimate means have found ways to produce it themselves using cheaply and get into other products to money. Unfortunately, pretty easy to do out there all over the place. So again, kind of like we're talking about cannabinoid receptors, opioid binds to certain parts of the brain, really boosts that dopamine and serotonin and things like that. It's good that people high, but again, it's very addictive and have the effects very quickly. And it's very difficult to overcome that addiction to it. So there's natural opioids and plants naturally. The synthetic that are fully man-made that are based on different chemical resemble opioids, and there's some synthetic natural. So 14% students were using prescription opioid without doctor's authorization. So youth opioid use is directly linked to sexual risk behaviors. That prefrontal cortex we're talking about, that's kind of like your brain. When you're faced with decisions, part of your brain when you're faced with, should I do this or should I not do this? That prefrontal cortex is your brain, that last part to develop. It kind of gives you pause. It kind of says, slow down, okay, think this through. What are the consequences of what you're going to do? If that part of the brain's clouded, it's not working right, it's not working right either because it's underdeveloped, it's not working, or it's not working right because there's a substance that's affecting that ability to reason and think things through. People can make choices that can hurt them and hurt other people. That's why there are so many occurrences of assaults and other crimes tied into substance misuse. So fentanyl, that tiny little bit on the tip, that's all we need to be that 2 milligrams right there. That's all it takes for it to be overdose amount. So it's 100 times more potent than morphine, 50 times more potent than heroin. So again, the effect of it is very strong. The potential for addiction it did not take much for people to come to it. So illegally manufactured it's not the legal fentanyl that's on. The illegal side. It's cheap. It's not hard to make. It's not hard to distribute. One of the reasons that these overdoses are happening is chocolate cookie. I don't know about you guys, but I like that nice balance of cookie and chocolate chip. You don't want too much of one, too little of the other. All right. But depending on how it's baked, you got the chocolate chips are they're spaced irregularly, right? You're not gonna have all the chocolate chips together in one spot. It's gonna be kind of separated throughout the whole cookie. And each cookie's gonna look different, right? They look a little different. That's kind of what happens with fentanyl. It's like the mixing process evenly distributes the fentanyl. So when they're saying it's a different prescription, they're not guaranteeing that it's evenly distributed throughout. So that's why sometimes what's happening is if you hear about multiple overdoses at the same occurrence, a lot of times it happens both to share a pill, but one person might overdose and pass, the other person might survive, but they're getting different concentrations depending on how the mixing process is done. Again, it's illegal, so it's not regulated. So again, you have which is real, which is fake. We take it, we just guess. Experts are guessing. But again, the manufacturing process is good enough to make it look legitimate, make it look like the real deal. So the top one's the real one there. Top one's the real one there. The one on the right, the left is the real one there. So again, like, it's a guessing game. People aren't going to know. The only technical way to do it is they have these test strips that are out there that you can technically use to dissolve the pill and get the test strip in there inside of their fentanyl. Most people that are using those type of pills for illicit reasons, concentration, high. So there's ways to technically test for it, and it's pushed in some places, but it's really going, people that are really at the largest threat, having that happen to them, going to use those test strips. So people, 883 died from fentanyl-related overdoses just in Texas alone. Fentanyl-related deaths and just fentanyl. And again, remember some of those other numbers were synthetic opioids. Just fentanyl, 89% increase. That's the big thing on it. 89%, a huge increase in 1 year. So again, these are some of the things that kind of look for if you're concerned that someone is having an overdose. All right, respiratory rate's a big one. Respiratory is very, very shallow, very depressed. Not breathing going on. They're not waking up. Okay, so you can shake them. You can, if you don't know what a sternal rub is, it'll wake people up if there's not something wrong. Right? Just to rub your knuckles and press on. They're not waking up from that. Something's going on. You're doing a heart, not a gentle massage. Lips and nails got the discoloration. Pupils extremely small. Might seem like they're choking or there's frothy stuff coming out of their mouth. Cold, clammy skin. Dizziness if they are semi-awake. So again, these all don't have to be present. Sometimes it's just a handful of the present, but those are just some of the things to be aware of. Some of that can happen along with the potentially going through the effects of a opioid. So again, the naloxone, life-saving, it blocks out the opioid receptors. Right? So it basically doesn't let the opioid connect to the part of the brain that has the effects. And it can restore normal breathing until 2 minutes. That's the nasal spray. It's not going to harm anybody if they're under the if they are overdosing. It's not going to harm someone if they're not. That's that's one of the benefits of it. There's medications on it that if they don't need it, you give it to them, it can have then side effects. If they're allergic to this, obviously. But most people aren't going to have any side effects. They're not having overdosing. We just really stick them hard, and that's what I'm doing something. The naloxone's not going to hurt. You can play this video. This will probably be the last video we'll do.
What's your emergency?
Simple as that. There's more in-depth training out there that really kind of go into the specifics of the medication and what to do, and recognizing the signs of an overdose. But using the naloxone itself really is just as simple as that. one more video. and then we can go outside. This one kind of goes over an overall of the fentanyl situation.
Is that something that like our students are gonna, because I know that was I to be able to show us who's looking for the day. Is that something we're gonna be doing?
I think that's something that I think parents are interested in, maybe get that for school officials.
That's all I need.
There's a lot of really good testimonials that are out there. Cover a range of topics. You know, it's one of the things some people get caught up in trying to scare people into it. We're just trying to make people aware, you know, like things like that. And it's the reality of it, it's the potential of those substances. The overdosing and the effect that it has on the individual, on the family, and the community as a whole. You know, so. Yeah, so there's different forms even of fentanyl that are out there now. There's Vaping, there's not new drug. So there's K2, spice. That's still, they do sometimes still call some of those synthetics that. The Vaping is actually another prescription drug that it was used for the different things used as a tranquilizer for animals. And again, it makes it with fentanyl and other things. It's not good for human use. So people that are really far into addiction, again, might use it because they're kind of into fentanyl and other prescription or other illicit substances. So again, cheaper, but still a little bit of heights the effects. It's not powerful. But yeah, if you Google drug advertising, it's another one that's out there that pretty horrific stuff. You know, of course, like I said, people are just overflowing into some of their addictions. The challenges of overcoming it that are the best. Get that high with that. Restriction.
A counterfeit, it's a mimic of a real product. If you think about sneakers or any kind of fashion wear or even money, right? You can see those products side by side and you can't see the difference between the two. When it comes to medication, the same thing applies. They look just like each other. And you can't make the distinction by visually looking at it. Scientists can't even do it. Police officers can't do it. There's a little bit of risk when we talk about merchandise, but there's a very grave risk when we're talking about medications. My name is Joe Bazinko. I'm a senior research chemist with the Drug Enforcement Administration, also known as the DEA. So a counterfeit pill would be one that looks just like a legitimate pill, something you'd get from a pharmacist. We've been analyzing both legitimate and illegitimate pills, or counterfeits, if you will, for decades now. So this is something that's been ongoing. It is now seemingly increasing more in the danger associated with what's contained in those counterfeit pills versus what we've seen in the past. We cannot visually look at a pill and say, oh, that's counterfeit or not. You really don't know until you do the analysis. I can tell you in my 25 years of being a chemist, I have never seen more fentanyl than I'm seeing now. This is not an isolated problem. It is everywhere. Fentanyl has legitimate use in the medical field for the treatment of pain. Illicit fentanyl, that is the fentanyl that we see put into these counterfeit medications, it's manufactured in these dirty labs. There's no great way to measure how much goes into each tablet. It really is reckless. When you're mixing a pill up, you have to mix all the ingredients together, and then you have to put them in the machine, and the machine will punch them out. The problem is with these pills, it's not easy to mix everything evenly. Let's say you had a mortar and pestle, and if I were to put in, say, 10 packets of white sugar, and then say 1 packet of brown sugar, and if you could sit there and grind and mix, you're going to find there's going to be hot spots and cold spots in there. An example of a hot spot and a cold spot, you'll see a lot of brown in one area, a lot of white in another area. It wouldn't be uniform, which is to say when it went in to make the pills, that dark spot of brown sugar that was in that would eventually make a very high load on a pill. That pill would have a lot of fentanyl in it. The research suggests that 2 milligrams of fentanyl can cause an overdose. The average pill that we see and analyze here has more than that in it. One pill can very much lead to an overdose. So 2 milligrams is a very small amount. It's literally just a few grains. If you look at a plain sugar packet, and that sugar packet has 1 gram of sugar in it, using the math of 2 milligrams, that sugar packet can kill 500 people if it were fentanyl. I want you to think about what 500 people is. 500 people could be your senior class. 500 people could be half of your school. It could be a part of your town. When I have a fentanyl exhibit brought into the lab, before anything happens at all, I'm going to put on my protective gear. I'm going to protect my clothing wearing a laboratory jacket. I'm going to protect my breathing and my airway using a big heavy mask with filters on it. I'm going to protect my eyesight so that nothing gets splashed in my eyes. I'm also going to protect my hands wearing gloves. Even with all of that, we still work in a fume hood, which has vacuum at the back that draws out anything like hazardous vapors or any of the powders. These are just some of the preparation we do when we begin to work with counterfeits, because again, they're unknowns and we prepare for the worst. I've actually had an exposure of fentanyl to where we had a laboratory accident on a fentanyl submission to us. I was rushed to the hospital and I spent the day in the emergency department. So even for those of us that have training, those of us that have the expertise and the equipment working on our side, it's still a danger, it's still a hazard, and can still represent a grave threat to your life. The danger that we see coming from these counterfeit pills is you really don't know what's in them. Fentanyl is a threat that affects everyone in every location, at every age group, and it is not worth the risk. And the fact of the matter is, once you take that tablet, there's no going back. There's no backspace. There's no Control-Alt-Delete. If it didn't come from that pharmacist, it could be counterfeit. It could end your life, impacting all your loved ones and your friends.
All right, so that's kind of another kind of summary of all the stuff we talked about. So the main thing you kind of I hope that everyone kind of takes away is that there's different substances that can have different effects. They can have different short-term effects, long-term effects. There's definitely been a lot of highlight on fentanyl and synthetic opioids because of the overdose deaths and it's just the mind-boggling, effect that opioids has had in our country over the last 20 some odd years. But again, THC products and the vapes, edibles, while they might not have the same overdose potential, overdose effects, it still can have very serious long-term consequences, very serious addiction consequences, life and family consequences. Because of the substance that are the mind altering, it changes the way people think. And so again, it's, I'm thankful there's things I can do a lot of stuff I can out there. Prevention is the best way to deal with it. In fact, if it is substance or legal substance. Prevention, you prevent use, you don't have to worry about treatment, worry about addiction, you don't have to worry about those things. So that's again why I'm thankful for being potentially, and I'm thankful that is our focus. But really let's take a look at the community to make prevention efforts effective. Any questions, comments, concerns? I know there's a lot of information that kind of rectified out there, but there's a lot of stuff to cover and relatively short. A lot of stuff I can do one presentation easily after each of those. 3, 4.
You know, a lot of our students are getting, any information about, fentanyl.
So I know we are doing some prevention education in the schools. I know this one's elementary school, we're doing so prevention education is kind of the main focus is resiliency and risk and protective. You build up those protective factors, you already don't have risk. One of the ways we do that is with your school programs, whether it's the one-time presentations or curriculum, we kind of focus on those positive life skills. decision making, healthy relationships, managing your emotions and everything. So, there's, I know, one of the elementary schools are doing curriculum. I know the sixth grade junior high and junior high are doing, life skills training. And it's just, it only briefly touches on some of the specific substances because that again is more focused on, the protective factors. So I know that all of sixth grade are doing that. And I know in various times throughout the year, we've done presentations, for some of the other elementary age students, on some specific, substances that the cities for all elementary schools on, tobacco products, alcohol, and their restriction, which briefly kind of touch on fentanyl. Don't tend to go too much into the specific fentanyl. Yeah, it'll be more like if it's a pill, get it off. There's a pill around. So it just kind of depends on what the age group you are working with. So yes, I know Red Archives is giving services and presentations and curriculums. Campus specifically request, offering whatever. Actually, I didn't remember system.
How often, once you have that initial conversation, how often should you, or I guess, what should you continue that, open up the communication with them?
Yeah, and I think that that can vary depending on what you see, what's going on around your kiddos. Because sometimes family friend groups they hang out with have a little more concern one way or the other, and maybe that comes into more often. But I think it's just kind of in general being open to everything that's going on in their life. Those significant. I don't really remember it, but there was something of a crazy statistic that showed families that sit down for dinner each night, like an intentional dinner meal together, and talk about their days like regularly. Like it just has an incredible impact on just unhealthy behaviors that kiddos could get involved in. So it's really just kind of that being that constant open door, checking in, seeing how they're doing. And then as things that pop up that might be red flags, kind of digging a little more deeper into it and asking more questions and giving them the opportunity hopefully to volunteer information. Those conversations are always the most easier to volunteer information than the ones when you find something in the backpack and what is this? So I think it is just kind of that openness, that open-minded communication of just general day-to-day life. And being willing to have the tough conversations with things to pop up. It can vary from family to family. Well, thank you all so much. I very much appreciate you guys being here. And it's Monday, or it's already an exhausting week. It's supposed to be a short for a lot of people too, so I feel like those short weeks sometimes feel like longer than the full regular weeks. So thank you so much for spending part of your night here. I really appreciate it. Join the information outreach program. We've got some posters up here. Feel free to take that. Hang around for a little bit. Anybody has any questions? Thank you.